This video covers the Food Safety Modernization Act 7 rules in 7 minutes. So first, let's start with a little background on the Food Safety Modernization Act and how it came about. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, 48 million people get sick each year, 128,000 are hospitalized, and 3,000 die from foodborne illness. Those are some sobering numbers. In addition, Dr. Robert L. Scharf, a former FDA economist and current Ohio State University professor, published a study that basically says $77 billion is the number representing the mean economic cost of foodborne illness each year in the United States, including the cost of illness, workplace loss, long-term health care, and other economic losses. And between 2000 and 2010, we saw some of the largest and most deadly foodborne illness outbreaks in the country's history, including outbreaks from cantaloupe, peanut butter, spinach, and eggs. Not only did companies not have preventive controls in place, but there was criminal negligence in some cases. So in 2011, in direct response to the increases we were seeing in foodborne illness, President Obama signed the Food Safety Modernization Act into law. And it was the largest piece of legislation in the U.S. for the food industry since 1938. The legislation for FSMA was largely crafted by the Grocery Manufacturers Association in cooperation with FDA. That's these guys. And it was designed in part to not only protect consumers, but protect the industry from these large foodborne illness outbreaks. So what's different about FSMA? Well, first of all, FDA has more authority to inspect your facility and see your food safety documentation. And FDA can now mandate a recall where in the past, recalls were voluntary. FDA is mandating a preventive approach to food safety rather than a reactive approach. And they're really asking that companies continuously improve their food safety programs. FDA is shifting the food safety responsibility in part to food companies to prove that their supply chain is safe. There are 7 foundational rules that are part of FSMA, and thankfully chances are good that all 7 don't apply to you. So in a minute, we're going to give you a brief explanation of each of those rules. And we're going to do all 7 rules in 7 minutes. So let's start the clock. The first rule, preventive controls for human food, is about preventing food safety hazards in the food that we make. This applies to domestic and foreign food manufacturing facilities selling food into the U.S. Some of the rules that have been updated are the good manufacturing practices and hazard analysis and what's considered a hazard. And some of the rules that are new are that companies have to have written preventive controls for each hazard they identified and have to document the hazards controlled by their suppliers. And also, FDA can mandate a recall now, so you need to have a plan. Second rule is preventive controls for animal food, which is to prevent food safety hazards in animal food. Again, this is very similar to the preventive controls for human food in that there are good manufacturing practices that must be followed, a risk-based food safety plan needs to be developed, hazards should be documented that are controlled by the suppliers, and you must implement a recall plan. The third rule, produce safety, is about preventing food safety hazards in the foods that we grow. In particular, preventing contamination of crops from agricultural water, soil and amendments, domestic and wild animals, and poor worker training and hygiene. There's also provision to practice sprout food safety and keep the farm areas clean. The fourth rule, foreign supplier verification, is about preventing food safety hazards in imported foods. And in this rule, the importer of the food is responsible for determining hazards in the foreign supplier sourced food, evaluating the foreign supplier food safety program, ensuring that annual on-site audits of the supplier's facility are performed, and taking corrective action if something goes wrong. Our fifth rule, sanitary transport, is about preventing food safety hazards during food transport, and this applies to shippers, loaders, carriers, and receivers. The rule states that we need to ensure the vehicle or what's in the vehicle doesn't contaminate the food. It also has a provision for ensuring temperature controls are adequate to protect the food, ensuring carrier personnel are trained, and maintaining documented procedures, agreements, and training records. Our sixth rule, third-party certification, or as we like to call it, certify the certifier, is basically applied to certifiers who are auditing, performing third-party audits of foreign facilities. So if you are working with a foreign facility importing a high-risk food into the US, we want to make sure that your third-party auditor is certified. And the third-party certification rule explains what's required in that case. In addition, FDA has a voluntary qualified importer program that information is specified about in the third-party certification rule. Our seventh and final rule is intentional adulteration. This is about preventing food safety hazards due to what we call bad intentions. Bad intentions could be acts of terrorism, acts that take place due to disgruntled employees, or economically motivated food adulteration by a supplier. And the provisions include assessing vulnerability of your supply chain, developing strategies to address vulnerabilities, having a way to monitor, correct, and verify, and train personnel and keep records. So that's a basic overview of the 7 rules. In the fine print, we just want to point out that exemptions due to company size, industry, and other factors are too numerous to fit into the 7 minutes. So please see industry guidance for rules that apply to your company. I also highly recommend that you check out the FDA at-a-glance fact sheets on the main FDA FSMA website. There's a fact sheet for each of the 7 rules, and they are typically only 2 to 3 pages long and explain the rule at a high level in human understandable language. That's all for now. Thank you for attending our 7 rules in 7 minutes, and please check out our YouTube channel for other great food industry learning videos.